Welcome to the Astana Times. I am Aybarshan, and today I'm joined by Ms. Natalia Gherman. Thank you, Natalia, very much for joining us today. Let me straight ahead jump into the conversation with you. And my first question regards the relationship between Kazakhstan and the United Nations within the joint action plan for the implementation of Global Counter-Terrorism Strategy in Central Asia. This document has been signed several years ago. And what are the most current adjustments or updates, and what are the action plans currently regarding this?
Big pleasure to be with you. Thank you for the invitation, and I'm very happy to be back in hospitable Astana. The relations between Kazakhstan and the United Nations are very dynamic, and we consolidate this partnership every year. Kazakhstan is a proud member of the United Nations, and we know that we can always rely on Kazakhstan for national, regional, and also global initiatives that Kazakhstan is very actively promoting. As far as the counter-terrorism cooperation is concerned, we know and we've learned during our stay in the past couple of days that there was great progress achieved by Kazakhstan in recent years in implementation of the relevant Security Council resolutions that are dealing with different aspects of counterterrorism. The progress was achieved at both policy level and the implementation of the relevant decisions. And I want to underline also the Kazakh efforts to strengthen the regional cooperation in preventing and combating terrorism and violent extremism conducive to terrorism in the region of Central Asia. And of course, the joint plan of action to implement the provisions of the Global Counter-Terrorism Strategy in Central Asia is a very eloquent example of that. Of course, obviously, it depends on the political will manifested to work together by all Central Asian member states. But I would also like to underline the efforts of Kazakhstan to bring the nations together and also to provide a very important inputs into the contents of this document. The first edition of the joint plan of action was actually launched back in 2011. And in the 10 years of its exemplary implementation, the countries of the region have achieved significant progress. And I would like to mention straightforwardly that this plan of action on a regional level remains to be unique in the world. There is no other region in the world that would have this regional effort of implementation of common tasks that are being formulated by all of us by virtue of the Global Counter-Terrorism Strategy. So, first and foremost, the states of the region decided to create the early warning network among themselves, which is a very innovative idea. And the states in real time decided to share all the information about new and emerging threats to their security, also provide more areas of cooperation between the law enforcement segments that are mainly involved in this work within the countries themselves, and of course align even more the legislation on counterterrorism. I would also like to underline that in the new edition of the joint plan of action, the special focus is based on the whole of the government and the whole of society approach, meaning that there will be more work, particularly at the level of prevention, based on the resourcefulness of communities, families, activists, even religious leaders, our civil society partners in analyzing the nature of threat.
Thank you, Mr. Voronkov, for joining us today. One of the initiatives created by Kazakhstan in this effort to counter terrorism was Jusan operation held several years back to return children from the combat areas. How do you evaluate the outcome of that operations, and what's its importance globally?
It's a very good question, because it's going about adherence to international norms and principles of the United Nations by Kazakhstan. And secondly, it's going about leadership we spoke about of Kazakhstan in countering terrorism activities. Why? First of all member states should take care and should take responsibility for their own citizens. This is one of the principles of the United Nations Charter. And Kazakhstan is doing this in absolutely 100% manner. So, of course, I'm not an advocate of any terrorist activities, as you understand. But on the other hand, it's going on about children and the big number of women which are detained on the territory of northeast Syria because of difficulties in life, because of some consequences of not very clever decisions of families, and so on and so forth. So to help these people and to help international community to solve this problem with detainees on the territory of Syria and Iraq, which is a kind of legacy of Daesh presence in these regions, is a strong commitment of any country. So it's very important that Kazakhstan is paving the way in this regard for the whole international community. Kazakhstan repatriated close to 100% of these children and women detained in the camps. It's not a very often story in the current world. A lot of countries refrain from this practice because they are not prepared to, first of all, to prosecute fairly, to rehabilitate them, and to reintegrate these people to the normal life.
My next question also concerns new challenges on a global scale. In this world of digitalization, I'm sure there are also newly emerging challenges regarding the terrorism. So what are those challenges on a global scale, and how does the UN adapt to those challenges? As you said, we should always adapt and move forward.
Yes, this is absolutely correct. As I said, well, unfortunately, with progress in all different areas, new threats and challenges also appear. And one of the features of the most recent times is a very rapid advance of information and communication technologies. With that, of course, come advances in the field of cyber security, in the field of artificial intelligence, and even in the field of unmanned aerial systems, or drones, as we know. So nowadays, of course, the Counter-Terrorism Executive Directorate and other UN entities are trying to help the member states in addressing those issues, and of course making sure that the emerging technologies would never be used by terrorists or groups with a terrorist intent. And the Security Council of the United Nations is tasking CTED, for example, to develop a set of non-binding guiding principles for the member states on the effective use by states and not allowing misuse by terrorists of information communication technologies, unmanned aerial systems, and also countering the financing of terrorism in relation to the advance of the technological platforms and cyber platforms. And here I would actually like to commend Kazakhstan, because Kazakhstan is, of course, leading the way in the region itself in developing those technological platforms that would be providing, of course, some more defense and security to the citizens themselves in terms of the proper use of internet, not allowing the misuse of internet for radicalization or violent propaganda activities.
Well, thank you very much for sharing how the UN deals with the current emerging challenges, and I was glad to learn that Kazakhstan is also taking its part and trying to stay up to date with all the challenges we face. Thank you very much for this interview.